You are listening to Wicked Psychotherapists, a podcast where two psychotherapists show you that taking care of and learning about mental health doesn't have to be wicked hard.
Hi, everyone. This is Tanya.
Hi, this is Erin, and welcome to Wicked Psychotherapists.
Yeah, welcome. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that is very close to me, something that I do understand, having a diagnosis of it, but also we felt the need to talk about it because it is not very well known and there is some misinformation out there. So we thought we would maybe get down to some of those points and see if we can kind of talk to them a little bit more so that you all may be more informed on that and also take something away from this. So, in terms of what we're talking about, we are discussing selective mutism, which is an anxiety based disorder that used to be actually called elective mutism, which they changed because they realized people weren't who had this disorder were not choosing to not talk. So elective kind of sounds like you're just electing to not speak. But selective mutism it's an anxiety disorder. It is on the anxiety spectrum as classified in the DSM-5 since 2013. It is something that's where it's commonly talked about in children, but I'm going to elaborate on that and talk about if it's not treated and what it looks like in adults, because I think there is a
Okay.
really big lack of literature in that. But so selective mutism is an extreme form of social anxiety where people may have difficulty speaking in particular social settings. It's not something it's almost like that person has such extreme anxiety, they're in a freeze state and they do not feel like they can speak and they feel locked in and kind of frozen in that. And for various reasons that I'm sure you can imagine and we'll speak to, this can cause a lot of issues, but as an adult as well. So there is something that I did want to talk about in relation to selective mutism, and I think there is a lot of misinformation out there that if you have selective mutism, you're on the autism spectrum, and that's not necessarily true. They can co-occur with one another. So they can, one can be along with the other, but it does not necessarily mean you are on the spectrum.
Okay.
It also, so I see that a lot. And I've actually heard that from people close in my life if I do start to talk about my selective mutism, because I was never formally diagnosed with selective mutism, but I have had and continue to have effects from selective mutism. I've heard people that are very intelligent, educated people just, if I talk about selective mutism, they start to talk about autism spectrum and they kind of go to that. And I think people may see it as you don't have the ability to speak or you're delayed in your speech, which is not the same thing. And I'm not at all saying that there is, the possibility that there can be some speech delays or there can be some speech difficulties because you're probably not speaking very much in particular settings, but people who have selective mutism can certainly be quite intelligent and have a high ability and range in language. And so I really see a lot of that and I hear comments, and it personally can upset me because it just is another instance of not being understood and feeling unseen.
Yeah.
So, have you ever had any experience with selective mutism, Erin, or any kind of, people that
Mm,
or people that, you may have worked with?
Well, I don't know if I've I have had clients that I suspect have selective mutism. And it's interesting that it used to be termed differently. So I like that it's now termed selective mutism instead of just like people had the choice to be mute or not speak in different situations. But I have a lot of experience working with people in the autism spectrum, and I have heard it classified like that, but I am happy to hear that it's not always lumped together anymore, that there's getting like people
Yeah.
are learning more about it.
Yeah, I think the more and more information that spreads about it, I think people learn, different information about it. However, I think the more that it's talked about on social media and the more information out there, that there can also be more misinformation too. So,
Right.
I just really kind of, I personally wanted to talk about this topic because I definitely had selective mutism as a child and I continue to because it was not treated. It was basically a time, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. It was not really well known. And I flew under the radar because I was a straight A student. I was not causing trouble, which I did intentionally to try and hide myself because I didn't want attention. Because one of the kind of catch 22s is that when you have selective mutism, you don't want attention brought to you, but at the same point, you need it. And
Right.
I think a lot of the teachers back then and a lot of people that knew me just thought I was shy or who knows, maybe antisocial, whatever it was, but they didn't, there was I didn't have any interventions. And similarly at home, I was a brood of 5 kids and, we didn't have financial means. Also, things just were not looked at individually in terms of mental health care. That wasn't really a priority as opposed to like, having food and survival means.
Right.
And again, I wasn't causing many problems at home. So it was never treated in the way that it can be now. I think it's more recognized and it can be, if intervened at a young age, I think there's a good
Hmm.
prospect of recovery.
Right. So,
Um,
Tanya, I have a question because you are somebody who had this and, probably still has some effects to it, like from dealing with it at a young age. When do you feel like it was discovered or that teachers or other adults in your life started noticing that it wasn't just that you're a shy child or not wanting to talk or that there might be something else going on?
I don't think anyone noticed that, again, because of the time frame, because I did get good grades, because I did what I had to do. I think I discovered it. Like, I was the one that was like, "Oh, this is what this is." And that was not until I was probably I was researching left and right because I just felt like something was so wrong with me and I was so ashamed and I didn't know because I was like, well, nobody's saying anything,
Right.
but I can't talk. And it was just, as soon as I turned 18, I went to my college's free counseling center and she didn't come out and say, "Oh, you have selective mutism," but I had researched and I said, "I think I have social anxiety. It's this thing." And then I started to research more and I was like, I think I had this extreme form where I was not talking around that time and just my own research because it was not very much out. It just wasn't really, I don't know if it just wasn't really well known, well researched, but I certainly didn't know until I was an adult. That was it. Instead, I just thought, well, I'm getting praise for this when I'm younger in elementary school, middle school. Then by high school, teachers, they start to want you to talk more and say, "Oh, well,
Right.
we have these group projects and, people, the way you learn the best is by experience." And I would just have constant anxiety to the point where I think I developed like ulcers. I had like the precursors for ulcers because
Oh,
I was
wow.
just constantly like something was always wrong. I just was so uncomfortable. I couldn't speak. I was trying to make it through a time when you're trying to discover your identity and I was trying to hide and I missed a lot of markers because of that.
Yeah.
Because there was any kind of developmental delays organically, like making friends, getting feedback to kind of figure out your identity and who you are.
Mhm.
Being able to experiment, you have to be comfortable to be able to experiment with things and be like, "Oh, I'm, a person who is really loves to organize things, so I could be like a leader and then I could, be in management or something," kind of those types of things. I really had to push myself to like, I mean, I was on a lot of teams and groups, but I was very quiet and I didn't get a friendship camaraderie from it.
Right.
I did it because I knew I had to do it. So I did like swim team, I did like diversity club, I was like LGBTQ. I think that was all it was back then, was just the LGBTQ. I don't think there was the IA plus. And I did newspaper, I
Mm.
things, but it was very hard because people that I had gone to school with for most of my life didn't know who I was, which is so awkward because it wasn't like I went to a big school, and tried as much as possible to not be around people because it was so painfully obvious I couldn't talk. And then there would always be the, why are you so quiet? It was always the thing. Why are you
Yeah.
so quiet? And first off, how do you answer that?
Well,
Why are you
because
so
then
quiet? That's like saying, why do you have brown eyes?
well,
I
and then
don't
they're
know.
pointing out this one thing that you realize is different than everybody else, but you can't control or you can't get help because it really doesn't have a name to it. And there's other people around, the
Right.
other adults in your life are not recognizing it, or other people are not seeing that anything's wrong or able to help you at this moment.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's a good point. And it's also like when I would try to talk, like I would try to get brave enough, I would raise my hand, and then three people would turn around and be like, "Oh my God, she talks," which would
Oh.
just have me feeling like an animal, and like
Mhm.
like I'm a specimen. And then I just would go right back in, and I would be like, I can't anymore because they're just going to keep pointing out how weird I am. And it was, at that point, if you keep going through, high school, I ended up making it to a college. I got scholarships, I did well, but I didn't know how to be a person that age. I had not had the opportunities. I couldn't handle it. And then I think that's when things started to deteriorate around college because I went to, like I said, a counselor, and she really worked with me. And it was the first time I started to see, I like took a look outside of myself and I said, oh my God, this is what I look like. And this is what I have to work on and have to fix. This is what people are seeing.
Right.
And I don't know how to do this. And it was a bizarre experience. And then also realizing I had all this trauma. I knew stuff was wrong, but I was like, oh my God, that's actually a lot of stuff from childhood that I had not really processed. And the fact that no one was concerned about this in my life. It was a lot to confront. And I think I just went into like oh my God, I thought I had everything figured out. I just did really well in school and that's it. But there was this whole other aspect that I didn't know how to be.
Yeah. So what was it
So I
like
missed a
when
lot of.
yeah, what was it like when you went to that therapist or the counseling center in college and you're telling them, I feel like there must, there's something different that I'm not communicating or I'm having difficulty communicating. And you said like they were almost trying to diagnose you with some form of autism at first, or not really. It didn't seem like they really understood.
This counseling center, no, this counseling center wasn't. That was like people I knew that would like
Oh,
go to
okay.
that. They didn't diagnose me. Those are just people I think that associate, selective mutism. They just kind of assume like if you don't talk, you have developmental
Okay.
delays, which they can co-occur, but that was not the case for me. And it was just very frustrating. That's just like people in my life. This counseling center, the therapist that I had honed in on the fact and was like, because I had read a lot about social anxiety. It was like kind of a new thing. And I was like, oh my God, I have this, but I have this to an extreme. It was really good to talk about it and for someone to say, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, look at where you came from,
Yeah.
with like all the
The
trauma, like you
trauma.
couldn't
Yeah.
talk to anyone. And also, it sounds like nobody ever really noticed anything.
Mhm.
Not only because like academically you were okay, behaviorally you behaved, well, but also I just didn't really, there was a lot of things that I think were overlooked in my childhood and there's a lot of lack of resources, an extreme amount.
Yeah.
And so that felt really validating and good, but it also felt life altering and heavy. Like, oh my gosh, I have a lot to do and I'm
Yeah.
behind. Like, and
Wow.
I mean, I've been playing that catch up game ever since, and I've always hidden it. Like I've always been like, I will show this part, but I'm not going to show this part because I'm still working on it because there's an element of shame built in there, a constant shame built
Yeah.
in. And it's like almost like your first instinct is to hide it. And I've had to kind of go against that and say, no, you know what? I know I have to like confront this. I have to put this out there. And it's been really hard. I think I see all the kids nowadays, this generation, and I think there's more eyes on it. There's like earlier, there's a recognition that there needs to be early intervention. There's a lot of support in that, at least from the public schools that I've been around. I can't speak for all of
Right.
them, but I think there's more so on the whole states about this. And they get in there and they do exposure therapy, they do like desensitization. They do, focusing on, okay, the teacher will work with them and not say, oh, you don't have to talk, but we'll say, we'll do it at your pace so it's not as
Right.
much pressure. And I just think, oh my gosh, if I had would have been life altering.
Yeah.
I would not have
Yeah.
felt like this alien
Mm.
these years and
Yeah.
still probably wouldn't. And really effective for a lot of kids. It's really like the way it's talked about in the literature is like this is an easy intervention, but I do have to say, I think it absolutely can be if it's recognized, but also you need support from your family as well. And you need to
Mm.
kind of have, the time in that, being reflected at home, as well as probably some resources to maybe get some outside help too. And so there's limitations to that, I think, even now. So, and in the literature now, when I read about it, it's like, oh, this is an easy fix. And that kind of prickles me a little bit. It's not an easy fix. This is a
Right.
very hard thing. And it still relies on other resources that you don't know if that child has. It may be very difficult for them. And not to mention, for people like in my generation and probably generations before me, I can't even imagine that
Yeah.
without the treatment, I mean, and without the recognition of it, it's very much it can lead to some disastrous results. You
Right.
can just, isolate. You can, really never figure out that, oh my gosh, I need help with this. I
Mhm.
need to work at trying to understand how to make friends and how to talk to people and these social skills that were pretty basic to most kids growing up, and that were
Right.
modeled in that. And, I think that's another point that I wanted to kind of talk about is the element of trauma in selective mutism. It's not technically in the DSM, it's not something that is linked to this. It is more like of a genetic predisposition in your environment, role modeling. But I do think that, it is a possibility. It is a contributor. And I absolutely I see it genetically and I see it modeled and I see it
Right.
like trauma for
Well,
myself
well, and that's
personally.
with a lot of anxiety too. A lot of anxiety is passed on. Sometimes it's genetic, sometimes it's learned. Sometimes it's, if we have a very anxious parent or we see how they act or behave in certain ways, we might model it, or it might be a lot of times different anxiety is trauma based too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's something that, I think it probably for our generation, I think our parents were very much do as I say, not as I do, but
Mhm.
that's not how a child learns, in
Right.
modeling. So you pick up on that and I mean, like, I know both of my parents were not, I think there was kind of a little bit of some anti-socialism, but maybe I misperceive that. Maybe it is shyness. Maybe it is, extreme anxiety. Definitely with my mom, and I would say with my dad too in different forms, maybe just shown differently.
Mm.
And I mean, it was so unnerving to me when my mom would bring us around relatives we hadn't really seen in a while. And she would say, go sit, like, what are you doing? My sisters and I would run in the corner or in another room. And she would, I could hear them talking about how bad we were, how rude we were. And the thing is, we were never socialized. Like, we were never told to say hello. We were never told that was rude. Instead, we
Okay.
just felt stupid because we didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that was also another part of it. Like it just, and my mom, who was like my primary caregiver, she didn't really model that very well either. And she like didn't teach it either. She
Mhm.
didn't it, so it was kind of like, where were we supposed to get that from? And I'm not trying to put her down. I know there were a lot of limitations to the things that she had to do, but that was my own experience.
Yeah.
So I kind of got on this feeling of, all this misinformation. I mean, the big one was that, if you are selectively mute, that, automatically have this, you're automatically like,
Mhm. Labeled.
yeah, like you're labeled as having, like, oh, you must be on the autism spectrum. And I mean, sometimes that does co occur with that. It does, but that's not necessarily always true. I didn't have any delays. I actually always was like a very top performer. Academics were very easy for me, which was very frustrating.
Yeah.
To not be able to like I knew the answers all the time, but I can't raise my hand.
Yeah.
I can't do this, and
Yeah, and it's just so frustrating too, hearing it as an adult, thinking of you as a child and not having the adults, the teachers come up to you and say, "Hey, Tanya, you're doing really great in school. I notice you're not raising your hand." Like maybe even talking to you privately, but it just seems like nobody was there. And it's really, I feel really frustrated and sad for you. Like that you didn't have those resources.
well, thank you. Yeah, I'm very sad for that person as well, that small person and all persons that have had to
Yeah.
go through that amongst, it really is a very frustrating thing. And honestly, I know it's at the time, teachers, I think it just wasn't really a thing. They just thought, oh, it's something you grow out of. You'll come out of
Yeah.
your shell.
Shyness.
And I can see that they thought that. Yeah, because they thought, "Well, she's performing, she's doing well, she'll be okay." And I think I'm more upset about the fact that I didn't have anyone personally in my life that was like, instead of it being, at home, it was almost kind of because of how dysfunctional my family was, it was very much mocked. There were names that I was called because of the way I behaved. I'm not going to say specifically, but, there were things that were, I think, assumed about me that like I wasn't intelligent, even though I was like, I'm getting better grades than you did,
Right.
and it just was really so hard. Like I just felt so unseen. And then on top of that, dumped on. And I realized that the product of because we were all in a dysfunctional environment, you kind of just, I guess, like
Yeah,
being
and
at
the
the bottom of
relation
the pile, you just
yeah,
get it.
and it doesn't sound like there was a lot of encouragement of having those sibling relationships. It sounds like the term civil sibling rivalry was probably very rampant in your household because it was not always the healthiest environment to live in. So a lot of the things that you
Yeah.
needed weren't really being fostered. So you needed somebody to recognize you, to help you, to support you, to get you out of
Yeah, it
to
absolutely wasn't, and yeah, absolutely. It definitely was not. You hit the nail on the head. There was not any resources. Instead, it was more, and again, this is the dysfunction of the environment. I'm not saying, I see where, I have 4 sisters and there was this undercurrent of competitiveness because when you don't have resources, you all fight for things,
Mhm.
whether it's emotional, whether it's love, whether it's being seen as the smartest, the best, the
Yeah,
prettiest,
the most
and
popular, the
it's
yeah.
still the most popular, yeah, who, I don't know, whatever, the most, the extreme, and that's kind of a part of sibling rivalry, but I think when you have something where you really need help, and I'm sure my sisters probably have stuff as well that may
Mhm.
even recognize, that it just felt like I was being like there were like almost like I was being called names for these things that I was, like, crying inside, like,
Right.
"Please, somebody I
Yeah,
don't know
somebody
this
see
is
me.
not me just not speaking." Yeah, like, I just really needed I was just hoping somebody would recognize it, but instead I had to hide it because it was mocked, to
Mhm.
be something that was kind of shameful. And I have to say, even to this day, I still see points of that with various family members, extended and, close
Yeah.
family, where I think it's just the way we grew up, that it's almost, "Oh, if you have that, you're weird. Way you're weird. You're strange. You're not."
Right.
And it's like adding salt to a wound because it's like I had to like literally figure myself out, heal from this, out
Mhm.
how to be a functioning, healthy person, and then turn around and help other people.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty incredible, Tanya, that for somebody who it sounds like until college or maybe even beyond really struggled with having conversations with others, that your profession you chose is talking and helping other people to figure out what's happening with them and to work on their struggles internally.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was actually an intentional choice because I said to myself, if I can make it, you make those promises to yourself
Yeah.
when when you're in traumatic situations and you say, if I can make it to the other side of this, I am absolutely going to, be in a place where I can help other people with this. This was my inspiration in the fact that I had a therapist, I know I've talked about this before, where she first was like, yeah, no, this makes sense that you have this. You're not ridiculous. You shouldn't be ashamed of this. This is
Yeah.
actually something you need help with and you needed support with. And I thought, oh my God, if I could be that for someone else, even though, talking is very hard, I had to really cultivate and get, and I still have days where it is like absolutely takes everything from me to talk, everything. And, I've had years and years of therapy on my own as an adult of just trying to, I mean, I got to say, there was definitely like a 10-year period where after college, when I moved to Florida, I couldn't find a therapist that understood that, but
Right.
I have one now I've been working with for about 10
Good.
years and is amazing and really understands that. And I mean, I just think that there should be more awareness of this
Yeah.
because not everybody got this treatment that it's just written about so flippantly, like, oh, this is nothing. This is just like almost like it's a cut on the
Yeah.
finger.
And it is interesting too, because you always hear, especially it seems like girls are labeled it more than boys, but that could just be because
Mhm.
I saw it in my life but
No,
it
you're
seems like
right. You're right. It
it's
is statistically, it is more like diagnosed in girls now.
and also I think it's also because with girls, it's always like, "Oh, well, she's just really shy. She's this, she's
Mhm.
that." So then it's probably dismissed. And then it's like, "Oh, well,
Yeah,
she's just really studious. She's that,
right.
she just keeps to herself. She likes books. She doesn't, so instead of really seeing like, well, wait a minute, what about the other peers in this person's age group? Or, they don't, instead I could see how it could just go from elementary school to middle to high school. It just because then people just then instead of seeing that it might be a diagnosable condition or something that they could help treat, now they're seeing it as part of your personality.
Right. And the thing is it does become part of your personality, and that's where it gets that's what I'm saying is, that's exactly it. Like it then gets intertwined and you have to, if you go make it to adulthood, you then have to disentangle that and then discover who you are and realize that maybe a part of it always will be a little bit a
Hmm.
part of you, even though
Yeah.
it's it's hard to admit that, but it is. And it's something I think that I've had to accept that it's not weird. It's not something, maybe I come off as awkward, in conversations, and I just have to accept that, hey, I can at least talk.
Mm.
This is something that I can get to this point. And I just think it's really important to get this early intervention and to recognize that and to be able to offer those support, at least at school, because, the child may not have it at home
Yeah.
and may be coming, it may be an environment where it's being supported, which was where I came from. It was definitely very much a benefit that I was just quiet and stayed out of the way of all the things
Yeah.
that were happening. So, I think just wanted to point out some of those things that I've heard personally from people in my life. And I don't think people mean this in a malicious spirit. It really is just very much a misinformation that you can have selective mutism. It doesn't mean you're on it can co-occur. And I'm just saying this as a matter of just a fact.
Yeah.
A
And
co
personal experience too. That's
Right. Right. Yeah. And that just because I feel like if you have this, you've already felt so unseen. Really just validating your experience is so important with, correct information and knowing the person and knowing what's going on.
right.
It can also co-occur with like OCD and panic disorder, other anxiety disorders, depression. In fact, it commonly does, which I have anxiety and depression and PTSD. And those are all, kind of, I think, genetic and trauma linked from
Right.
as a child. And you can have developmental delays and language problems. Personally, I think I could have benefited from speech therapy as
Hmm.
a child, but I wasn't an identified person because I never spoke. So they didn't
Right.
really,
So how would they have
know.
known? Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
again,
I
hopefully
had
yeah, I was gonna say, hopefully kids nowadays, like, they are being assessed. Again, it is really unfortunate that
yes.
you weren't being seen or you weren't being assessed for that because maybe they would have caught it or seen something.
I'm not sure if they did do something or if it's just the teacher makes the referral. I don't know how it was done. And I still am not aware of it right now. So teachers, let me know. I'm still not sure.
Yeah.
I am by no means blaming. I think I had great teachers. I just don't think it was a thing that was recognized. And again, I flew under the radar, but
Yeah.
I also had really bucked teeth, and I had kind of, it was always hard for me to enunciate. I had braces for like 5 years, but that was later on in my teen years, and I had a tooth discoloration on my front teeth, so I would try to hide that. So there was a lot of things that would
Oh,
impact my speech, and
yeah.
it was really hard, and since I didn't speak, I would speak really low, and it took me a long time to just feel like to even develop, like, literally a voice that I hear.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it
So it
sounds
was
very much like, it's probably a lot of self-esteem stuff too that you might have felt like you weren't worthy to have a voice at first. But then, with the select mutism, you probably started to lose your voice or it became more difficult.
Yeah, I think I didn't use my voice very often. I just
Yeah.
didn't, because a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, you'll use it when you're feeling safe," and I didn't have a lot of safe places,
Yeah.
that I could feel safe. I think probably going to my friend Catherine's house, that was the only person, and I'm, like, very shy around the adults because I just thought, "Oh, I can't talk around adults." I would mainly just be to my friend Catherine, who was, like,
Wow.
a good friend of mine, who always took me in and understood me kinda thing. But, yeah, I think and now I really just wanna point out, how I got here. It was not I don't recommend how I got here. I really hope other people have support or have means of intervention before then, but since it was just not out there, and it certainly was not out there for adults
Mhm.
about treatment, for this. I still think it's lacking in treatment for adults because whenever you look it up, selective mutism will talk about it as a child, like a child who has selective mutism because
Mm.
everybody grows out of it and gets treatment. But that is not the case. Not for people in my generation and
Yeah.
probably before, and then
Yeah.
maybe some really overlooked kids now.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
funny because you mentioned social anxiety, and that seems to be more almost socially acceptable for adults to say, "I don't wanna public speak," or "I don't wanna do that," or "I'm really nervous about this interview," or "I don't wanna go meet new friends," or "I don't wanna go do this or that," because I have a little bit of anxiety and possibly social anxiety, where maybe they have a little bit or had a little bit of, maybe their anxiety showed up in other ways when they were younger and they just never
yeah.
realized it.
Yeah, yeah, and it could be something they developed over time, I do know that a lot of people I see as clients just as a therapist, they do often indicate they have social anxiety, and I'll hear that expressed as, "I just feel kind of awkward
Mhm.
being around people,"
Yeah.
and I think that generationally in the younger generation may be the, technology, social media age of not, having, like, person to person contact.
Mhm.
That may be a contributing factor, or there may be just some of that lingering. Maybe it didn't
Yeah.
get caught, and that,
Yeah. I mean, I
I
know.
definitely
Yeah.
do like to
It is hard.
dive into that.
Yeah. I mean, especially you're probably the best therapist for seeing somebody who has possible, selective mutism or social anxiety because, not only are you trained in it, but also your empathy is probably so high and you probably you're probably able to recognize it so well in your clients.
I feel like I can spot someone who has selective mutism a mile away, like, just in my everyday life. There was actually a family member on my husband's side that I knew as soon as I met her, and I just knew. I was like, I recognize this. I know what this is," and she actually was, I believe, diagnosed kind of in, like, her teenage years, and I talked to her mom about that and about my experience because I said, "Yeah, I do see that," But yeah, it is something. It's almost like if you have it, like you can see it a mile away. Like how people
Yeah.
are there's a lot of avoidance patterns, you try to avoid things. I still to this day have to socially there are things that, I've gotten a lot better because I just literally had to force myself to do
Mhm.
it. And kind of that exposure therapy, doing it yourself as an adult
Yeah.
is hard to do. Like, like if you unless, if you have it as a kid, and you can get that support, that's great. It's still very hard. But as an adult, you feel awkward and you feel like, "Oh my gosh," and there's a lot of shame in
Yeah.
that. And so
Yeah.
I frequently will, kind of go into shame spirals, not so much anymore, but I would at certain times and be like, I can't do this, and then it would cause like a lot of depression and it's debilitating. It's debilitating
Yeah, it's probably
sometimes, and
exhausting too. It's probably very tiring,
yeah,
physically.
yeah, it is. It absolutely is. I tell my husband this because I don't, I think when I've been managing it, I've been facing it, like, over the past decade, I've been sleeping a lot more, and I said, "I really think it's because of that," like,
Yeah.
not like I'm not talking like I'm sleeping, like, during the day for, like, 14 hours. I mean, I feel like I need to have, like, 7, 8 hours as opposed to, like, I can't run on, like, I cannot function on it because I need that sleep. But, yeah, it's very much something that I feel like is I'm speaking to the things that I've read in, articles, I'm speaking to things that I've heard in my own personal life, clients that I've worked with, and I just really want to put it out there that it is absolutely, I think something that needs more discussion. However, I recognize that is part of the problem, right? If you're selectively mute and you have difficulty you kind of talking and then, but the good thing about social media, and I love this when the advent of social media came along, I said, oh my God, like somehow writing and putting a post and expressing in
Mhm.
that way
Yeah.
was so much like, I was like, I don't feel that like, I don't freeze up in that. I
Yeah.
can communicate with that. I'm not talking like I'm a keyboard warrior and I'm putting like all this crap. I'm saying like I could actually feel
Yeah.
and I wonder if other people experience that as well with
Yeah, you have
with,
time
um
to reread it or to really wait for your reply. People aren't just even probably the same with text or email. That was probably really nice for you to
Yes.
feel like, okay, well, there's not I know some people are like, they have to reply right away, but honestly, people, we don't. You don't have to reply instantly to a text or an email. Come on. But you get the chance to just sit and think of your thoughts of how you want to reply or if you want to reply. And that is probably a lot nicer and feels probably safer than having to have a one-on-one face-to-face conversation.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's not something that takes away at all. Like you still have to do the face to face. You still definitely have
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But it definitely made a lot of things like because it for me physically, and I'm not saying this is for everyone, but physically, the act of speaking was absolutely draining and I can't explain. It was painful. The act of opening my mouth and saying words was so hard. It was almost like I had all these thoughts and these ideas, and there was just a complete to like get it out there. And so being able to just go, oh, I can just access all this stuff here and do that's great. I can do that was wonderful. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of kids now, they probably will have access to, there's stuff that I'm like, "Oh, man, that would have been amazing." A friend, online and then maybe felt a little more comfortable meeting them in person and, or just something, I don't know, express something. It just feels like, there's a lot of things that can help with that, but there's also a danger and you don't wanna just
Yeah,
interact in that way.
you don't know who you're talking to but I do see the benefit for people who might have difficulty talking to people in person or making friends in person for that
Yeah.
but there is the loss of almost like you've mentioned before, like the exposure of doing the hard things, of having those conversations and
Right, right, and the just the face-to-face nature, reading the facial language and the body
Mhm.
language and having those social cues and everything like that, you still have to be aware of those, and
Right.
I actually never that was never an issue for me. I actually could
Well
read someone too well. I felt
well
it too
Well,
much.
yeah. Well, you've mentioned that you have family of, you have history of trauma. So, yeah, of course you're able to read the room. You're probably able to read every single person's emotions in every room that you're in. You probably still do.
Yeah, it's something I have to pull back on, and that's also another thing about being around a lot of people is I really can, I am very empathic in that way, and I'm not saying, like, I can absolutely feel what everybody's feeling, but I have a very heightened sense of that, and, that is something that it's not that I couldn't read social cues in terms of that, it's that I didn't know when to add in my speech and what to say and how to say it. It was physically, like, painful to
Hmm.
do it for me personally.
Right.
But yeah, and I think I really in with becoming a therapist, I said, well, this will absolutely I can't let people down in this. I have to be
Yeah.
able to talk in this. I'm glad I did that. I'm really because it kind of fulfilled that promise I made to myself to help other people, but it also put myself
Yeah.
out there and
Well,
has me doing it daily.
Yeah, I was gonna just say that. It's kinda cool because there's not a day that unless you're off or something like that, that you really can say, "You know what? I'm not going to talk." So you have opportunity every single day where you have to have that interaction. Because even if you do a telehealth, you're still having that face-to-face, interaction and having to talk. And yes, as a therapist, we're not running, we're it's not all about us, but you're still having to talk and you're still having to engage.
Yeah, I have to connect with that person. I have no choice but to, and it has
Right.
absolutely been something that I think telehealth has made it much better because in person, it's almost like I overread the cues, and I don't know if that's part of the selective mutism or if, like, I just again, for like you said about the trauma, like, I almost overread things, and
Yeah.
then I get my mind can't focus on other things, so
Yeah.
telehealth allows me to reduce that overstimulation.
Yeah. I notice because I have anxiety and I notice doing it in telehealth, I'm definitely more in tune with the client because when a lot of times in person, I am hyper aware of the door. I'm hyper aware of how I'm sitting, what I'm, like, oh gosh, should I have my leg crossed? Should I not? Should I be across from the client or should they be kitty court? It's very silly stuff that most people probably don't think of, but because of my anxiety is higher than probably a lot of people, I do notice that I'm aware of stuff like that.
And I think that is something that it absolutely is great because, we ourselves are tools, right? In conducting therapy and we have to have a certain level of like calmness so we can connect and like in being in tune. And like you said, if your mind space is in your emotional capacity is being taken up with those things that your anxiety really hooks into, you can't really be there. But telehealth allows you to like you can fidget with something like on
Mm.
and they wouldn't even
Yeah.
know you're doing it, like, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're comfortable in your own space. And
Mm.
pet, you got Paige over
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah, there's sometimes that
Um,
it's funny because most of my clients know Paige. Like, some have seen her, some know her name, but sometimes that Paige will just come into session, like, because usually her bed's, like, just in the corner, but she'll put her head on my lap while I'm in session, so sometimes I'll just be petting her during session.
yeah. She's so cute. Yeah, so, I mean, this was kind of a little bit different, I think, than our but I just had kind of a fire lit under my butt
Yeah.
about it because I saw some misinformation and I started to think about some of the people in my life that they've said things and, obviously, again, not maliciously, but I just felt the need to come on and kind of almost use my voice,
Yeah, this is the best platform to do it. And when we first started our podcast, we said we were going to, of course, talk about things we like. Of course, we always talk about movies and shows and different things, but there's also going to be different things that are personal and also relevant if we see trends or things coming up. And this was something that Tanya saw and heard and that people were recently talking about. And of course, it's near and dear to her.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it hit me, it struck a chord. And not only just because of my own experience, but because I know if other people went through that, I mean, having to go through that it's just, it's such a I mean, amongst many other things, but this is something that, selective mutism is very much, I'm very aware of and very in tune with to come on here and say, hey,
Yeah.
it's not, necessarily this. And again, I do want to preface that I am not at all saying when I say, you don't necessarily, you're not on the spectrum necessarily if you have selective mutism, they can co-occur. I'm saying that for people to feel seen and understood. And that's why I felt the need to make that distinction
Hmm.
because I've just heard people jump to again really, smart educated people and just when I've talked about selective mutism, they start talking about developmental delays and being on the spectrum and it takes away from, people if that's not a part of their experience, right? Then that's cool, but, it's not something I've had that personally, and I've thought, "Wow, like, have you not you really don't know a lot about this, and you have not been listening to me,"
Hmm.
and that it feels a little invalidating, so
Yeah.
but I also realize it's not well known, it's not well researched, it's not really talked about, and that's why I wanted to and say it, so that maybe somebody can hear that and recognize that, that of when they know they're locked in there and they don't understand why they can't speak and to say, oh, wait, that is something and I can get help for that. I'm really hoping that they can, through your teachers, a therapist or someone safe in your life. I really hope they're able to.
Yeah. And
Um,
again, just think of all the people that your child, you as a child, is now helping as an adult with this. Like, so, I know it sounds pretty, out there or whatever, but it is. You're able to heal your inner child by helping other people too.
Yeah, and I would absolutely be lying if I said that's not part of the process, and,
Yeah.
some people look at that and they say, "Oh, you should just be a therapist 100% for other people." Yeah, but we all have parts of ours
Mhm.
that are in
Yeah.
our jobs, and yeah,
And
that is part
yeah,
of it.
and a lot of times, like even doctors, their specialty, they're impacted by something, and therapists choose to have different specialties based on how it may have affected them. It's, people,
Yeah.
I don't want to say we're all selfish, but you're driven by something that interests you and that you might have a personal connection.
Yeah, that's human nature. It's up for you because you understand it and you wanna learn about it and you wanna promote healing in that, hopefully,
Yeah.
healing in that.
Yeah.
I would
Mhm.
people would want to,
Yeah. Yeah. That would make
because you don't want
sense.
other people
Yeah.
to experience that. Yeah, and you want to advance how people are treated in those situations or with those disorders or whatever it is that the
Yeah.
so, I am very happy that it is more well known. I'm happy that it is something that it sounds like it's being treated and recognized a lot more in schools and at younger ages. And I really think that, if there's if somebody's listening to this and they don't have any resources, you can Google selective mutism help or resources. There's information. There's other ways to access. Sometimes they have free groups or free,
Mhm.
kind of consulting one on one. But, please do so. I do think, a lot of schools and other, community resources have been more active in this, but just in case, you never know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, that's
Thank you. Thank you,
that's
Tanya.
my
Yeah. I was gonna say thank
my
you
story.
for it's a that's not all of it. That's not all of who you are. That's not your whole story. But it's a lot, and I'm really excited that you shared it, and it was really brave of you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate being given this chance and this episode to be able to do
Yeah.
it because it
Yeah.
it feels good.
You're pretty I know I always, like, tell you that you're awesome, but, you're pretty amazing, Tanya. Just, and I know I said this earlier, but just that you are a therapist and that you do all the, like, because you could have gotten a job in a lab, never talking to a person, or purposely finding a career where you did not have to speak to anybody. But you chose to find a career where you're going to have to speak to people and use your voice every single day. That's so brave and so awesome that you did that.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And, the feeling's mutual for, we've talked about a lot of things, in your life as well. And yeah, I think you're, very admirable for turning your experiences into your career as well.
Oh,
So, and your life in general, I guess we're both pretty awesome. So,
despite our childhoods. Yeah.
yes, traumas. But yeah, so I think we can wrap it up here.
Yeah.
We hope
Okay.
you enjoyed this, subject. And if you have, certainly if you have any questions, anything you want to add, any of your experiences, please feel free to either DM us or, leave a comment. We love to hear from you or any topics that you want to hear about in the future, anything.
Yeah.
We love to hear from you.
Yeah. If there
Um,
are any
and
other, like, mental health topics, if you want us to talk more about different shows, different movies, different characters, or anything at
love
all.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let us know. Tune us in. Cause sometimes we find some stuff and then sometimes we need some referrals.
Yeah,
So
and
help
sometimes
us.
you guys have to tell us, like, it's
Um,
okay to get out of
but
1984 for things, yeah, maybe.
yeah, we do tend to stay in that era. It's our comfort zone. But
We're very
yeah,
retro, yeah. But,
we
yeah,
are. We are. We're vintage. Okay. Yeah. So and feel free to follow us or please follow us on Instagram
yeah,
at Wicked Psychotherapists and Facebook. We are the Wicked Psychotherapists. But yeah, thanks guys. We really appreciate it. And
mhm,
we will see you all or you'll hear us all and see clips of us the
yeah,
next week. All right. So all right, guys. Well, we always have fun. We're going to close it out here.
yeah,
But as always, it's been fun. Forget, stay wicked.
and keep your mind well.
Yes, do so. All right, guys. Take care. We'll see you
Okay,
next week.
alright, okay, bye-bye.
Bye, guys.